GoPros aren't just an action camera, they're also an incredible tool for making amazing night lapses. In fact, one of my favorite use cases for the GoPro is to create time lapses. And night lapses are my favorite type of time lapse. In this video, I will be sharing all of the specific settings I use when creating night lapses. For today's video, I'll be using the GoPro Hero 9 Black, but the settings I will be showing you can also be used on the GoPro Hero 5 Black, 6 Black, 7 Black, and 8 Black. Most of the settings will be the same, but some of the older GoPros may not have all of the same options or ranges. For night lapses, there are two main scenarios you'll want to configure your GoPro for. One is a night lapse where the moon is present in the sky. The other is a night lapse where the moon is not present in the sky. The reason these need to be configured differently is because the moon is a significant source of light in the nighttime sky, and whether you have it there or not will greatly affect some of these settings. I'll be showing you the settings separately for both of these scenarios. First, let's start with the settings for a night lapse with the moon in the sky. Once you've powered on your GoPro, you'll want to make sure you're in the time-lapse mode. Once you're in the time-lapse mode, you're going to click on this settings button at the bottom. That's going to bring you up some options. You should see an option called Night Lapse. You'll want to click on the edit button to the right of that. Once you've clicked on that button, you're going to see a menu here. On this menu, you're going to see several options. The first one we want to make sure we change is Format in the middle. We want to change that to Photo. Once you change it to photo, you're going to see some options that you perhaps did not see before. For the interval option, we want to make sure that's set to auto. For the shutter, we want to configure that to 15 seconds. For output, we want that to be RAW. RAW photos are going to offer you the highest quality, and they'll offer a lot of detail that will make it easier for you to make an amazing time lapse later on. For scheduled capture, you'll want to make sure that's set to off. Duration will be set to no limit, and timer will be off. In the next section, you'll want to make sure your white balance is set to 4000K. Now you could set your white balance to auto, but there's a great risk that your white balance is going to change on you during the time lapse, and if it does change, it will make it a nightmare or impossible to make a time lapse that has a consistent white balance. So you'll want to set it to 4000K. You can always change that later on while editing. For ISO minimum, you'll want to set this to 800. For ISO maximum, you'll also want to set this to 800. For sharpness, you'll want to set this to low, and for color, you'll want to set this to flat. The other options will not apply for this time lapse. For a night lapse with no moon in the sky, you'll want to configure the following settings. For these settings, you'll once again want to go to the night lapse option and click the edit button. Most of these settings will be the same as with the moon, except there will be a few of these that are different. The format of photo will be the same. The interval of auto will be the same. With the shutter though, you will change this to 30 seconds. 30 seconds is going to keep that shutter open for a long time so that it can capture as much light as possible from stars, the Milky Way, and meteors. For output, you'll want to set RAW. You definitely want the highest quality photos when you're doing stars without a moon. For duration, you'll set no limit. For timer, you'll set it to off. For ProTune options, you'll set the white balance to 4000K once again. And again, you can change that while editing if you so desire. For the ISO minimum, you will set this to either 800 or 1600. Oftentimes, I'll set this to 1600 when I'm doing the sky without the moon, because it will get the most possible stars and other features in the sky, such as the Milky Way or meteors. However, it also will introduce some noise into your time lapse. There are ways to do a little bit of denoising when editing and to smooth things out a little, but I've also used ISO 800 in this case and that has worked well for me as well. The sky will be darker and you won't capture as much light, especially with the Milky Way and other features, but you will have a lot less noise. So either 800 or 1600 is acceptable for this. I recommend testing out both just to see which you like best. But for now, I'm going to set this to 1600. I have found that 1600 is my favorite. You want to make sure your ISO maximum is also set to 1600. If you're doing 800 for your ISO minimum, make sure your ISO max is also set to 800. For sharpness, you'll want low. For color, you'll want flat. And then the bottom section will once again not apply for this. So while I'm here, I will note that if you would like to make two separate night lapse modes, one for the sky with the moon and one for the sky without the moon, you can go down here and click this plus sign, and it will allow you to create a whole new time-lapse mode. So you would drag this down and select night lapse. Once you do that, it's going to let you configure all your settings here. And then it is going to allow you to save it separately. So this is a pretty neat feature. I don't use this because I'm fine just going in and changing the ISO, the shutter speed, and a few other settings when I'm doing a night lapse. But if you want to have two separate modes to make it easy to toggle between them, I definitely recommend doing that. Now, even after configuring these settings, sometimes the night sky will bring surprises. For instance, one night I was shooting a night lapse and there was the moon in the sky at that time. But along comes a thunderstorm and sets up shop about 2 miles away. And there's incredible thunder and lightning for about 4 hours. I of course got more than I bargained for with that time lapse, and I actually ended up getting some pretty neat shots of the moon displaying itself behind the towering cumulonimbus clouds. And I also got a lot of lightning in that night lapse. It was pretty sweet. Another night when I was shooting the night sky without a moon, a snowstorm moved in and my camera got covered. But I got some great shots of the night sky and the clouds moving in. Sometimes those surprises when you're shooting a night lapse can end up making the night lapse even better than you planned for. Once you've captured these night lapses, you'll want to edit these. For editing, I recommend using Adobe Lightroom, as this allows you to edit one photo and then apply the settings to all of them. And based on the average interval, you're probably going to have approximately 1200 to 1600 individual photos that make up your night lapse. For an in-depth look at how I edit time lapses, you'll want to check out the video that I have linked to above. In this video, you'll want to go ahead to technique number 3. Technique number 3 is where I edit the individual photos before creating a time lapse with them. This will show you every step you need to know. Night lapses are by no means the easiest thing to shoot. That's what makes them so much fun. By using these settings, you are well on your way to creating an incredible night lapse. If you found this video to be helpful, please click like. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd love to have you on board. Please hit that subscribe and bell notification button so you'll be notified as soon as I publish a new video. Until we talk again, happy night lapsing.